Today we're going to be discussing waste, specifically solid waste and hazardous waste. Waste management is something we interact with almost every day, often without thinking about it, but it is very important, especially from an environmental and health perspective. In this chapter, we'll look at the main goal of waste management and the different types of waste we produce, including municipal, industrial, and hazardous. We'll compare traditional disposal methods with newer, innovative approaches. We'll also discuss e waste and the global movement of waste, and finally connect all of this to the idea of the circular economy, where waste is seen as a resource rather than a problem. At its core, waste management is about protecting both people and the environment. Proper disposal reduces the spread of disease and keeps living areas clean, especially in large cities. Managing waste responsibly also helps conserve resources by recovering materials that can be reused instead of extracting new raw materials. Waste practices influence climate change too, so landfills will release greenhouse gases while recycling and composting can significantly reduce them. Ultimately, effective waste management helps prevent pollution of the air, water, and soil and protects ecosystems and public health. There's several broad categories of waste. Municipal waste is what we're most familiar with. Our everyday household trash like food scraps, packaging, and yard waste. Industrial waste comes from factories, agriculture, and mining, and it's often produced at a much larger scale. Hazardous waste is the most concerning because it includes toxic, flammable, corrosive, and reactive materials such as chemicals, medical waste, batteries, and paint. Improper handling of this hazardous waste can cause serious harm to people and ecosystems, which is why it is so important for it to be heavily regulated. For decades, landfills have been the primary waste disposal method in the United States. We bury our waste in layers and then we seal it away, and this isolates it from the surrounding environment, but it creates some problems. One of those is methane emissions. Methane is a potent greenhouse gas. We also have leachates, which these are contaminated liquids that pollute groundwater if they're not properly controlled. While landfills are effective in managing large volumes of waste, they are not at all environmentally neutral. In response to the limitations of traditional disposal, innovative waste management practices try to reduce waste and recover value from its materials. Composting turns organic waste into nutrient rich soil. Smart waste uses systems like technology to optimize collection and reduce inefficiencies. So, one example of this, they've actually developed robots that can detect what type of material waste is made out of. So, you can actually see videos online where they're going through and they're picking through and separating out different forms of waste. Waste to energy approaches convert non recyclable materials into usable energy. This method is used both in Pinellas and Hillsborough County. So, what it does is it takes that energy, usually puts it into an incinerator, burns it so that it can produce electricity. And then scrubbers will actually collect some of the materials that that burning releases. And those materials can also be converted into new waste products. If you ever get a chance to go to the Manatee Viewing Center in Apollo Beach, it's operated by Tico. They have a little educational display where they show some of the byproducts from those. So let's take a look at some of the innovative practices. Composting keeps waste out of those landfills, and it does so by breaking down organic material into something that can fertilize soil. Examples of things that can be composted include our food scraps, any paper. So if you get a bunch of junk mail at your house, a lot of that paper can be used for compost. Natural fibers like 100% cotton, wool, or linen. All of these things can be broken down and used for composting. And you can even do this at home. They make pretty cheap systems where it's a big circular barrel that has holes in it, but you have to take kind of like a pitchfork and churn it up a little bit once in a while. They also make rotating ones where you put your waste in and then you spin it around, and those usually work a little bit faster. There's also trenching methods where you can kind of like dig a little trench in your flower beds and put some waste in there, and the soil will naturally break it down. Although I will say, in my experience, that has attracted a lot of ants. But these are just a couple of examples of methods that might work in your garden. Incineration, when carefully controlled, reduces waste volume and generates energy, but it must be managed to limit emissions. That's what those scrubbers I mentioned do. They filter the emissions and collect raw material that can be resold to other industries and reduce costs. There's also smart waste systems that use sensors and data to improve collection routes and reduce costs. So, what these do is they look at the amount of waste that's being produced in certain areas. And they use that information to weigh how frequently those areas need their trash picked up. So let's say we have a massive subdivision. They're producing a lot of waste. They're very wealthy. They can afford to throw things out. They might get pickups more frequently than a rural area that they might have backyard farms where they compost materials and they produce a little bit less waste. Recycling innovation includes the automated sorting machines that I mentioned and chemical recycling. This allows those materials to be reused more effectively and reduces the reliance on new resources. The main emerging technology that's transforming waste management is the use of artificial intelligence. AI systems can identify and sort materials more accurately than humans, leading to higher recycling rates and lower concentrations of contamination. These systems also help optimize pickup schedules and reduce operational costs. Overall, waste management is becoming much more data driven, efficient, and connected to broader sustainability goals. While technology plays a vital role, the most effective strategies still start with individuals and community behavior. Reducing waste at the source limits what ends up in landfills. Reusing items extends their lifespan and cuts down on consumption. And recycling conserves resources and reduces greenhouse gas emissions. Together, these practices form a foundation of sustainable waste management and significantly lower the environmental impact. Waste management becomes especially challenging at the global scale. Rapid urbanization and population growth put pressure on the systems that are often under resourced. Many regions lack adequate infrastructure for safe disposal of recycling. So those tend to end up in areas where you have heavy populations. A lot of the times they're in high poverty areas. Public awareness also plays a major role. Without understanding how and why to manage waste properly, participation in waste management programs is very low. Addressing these challenges require investments, education, and coordination when planning. And those in themselves can be very challenging to obtain. Electronic waste or e waste includes items like phones, computers, and televisions. These products contain valuable materials such as metals, but they also have hazardous substances like lead and mercury. Many wealthy nations export their e waste to developing nations where it's often processed under unsafe conditions. This poses very serious risks to workers and the environment. International agreements like the Basel Convention tried to regulate this trade, but so far enforcement has been very inconsistent. Governments and organizations play a key role in shaping waste management systems. Through policy development, they set standards and regulations. Infrastructure investments ensure that communities have access to proper disposal and recycling facilities. Public education initiatives raise awareness and encourage responsible waste behavior. And collaboration between governments, nonprofits, and private companies is essential for creating an environment where these solutions last. They work together to help work towards all of those previously mentioned goals. Community involvement is a very important part of waste reduction. Activities like cleanups and recycling drives can help reduce pollution while increasing awareness. Communities can also work with local businesses to promote sustainable practices like reducing packaging or offering refill options. Education programs and local composting initiatives can help build long term environmental stewardships and share responsibilities. I know in my area there's a couple of very small farms that will accept materials for composting and they will do it on site for free. So that's one way where you're also benefiting your community by donating your compostable materials. Some community engagement solutions include decentralizing waste systems to reduce the need to transport waste for very long distances. And this kind of encourages a little more responsibility within the local community. If you have one big, large facility, if you think about Pinellas County, going from North Pinellas County to South Pinellas County is a pretty far distance. If you were to transport all of that waste to one facility, even if it's somewhere in the middle, that's still a long distance. But if you have a couple of other facilities that are spread out, that are smaller, you can transport those a shorter distance and still accomplish the same goals. Community composting and recycling programs can also empower residents to take an active role. So if you have community composting, I saw this a little bit in Europe where you actually had these bins that you would put your compostable material in. There were other little local farms that would use that. There were also these little, I've seen this also in Montreal, where they make these little raised flower beds. And if you have an onion or a carrot that maybe is starting to look a little sad, you can go and replant it inside of the little raised bed. And anyone within the community, when that vegetable is ready to be picked, they can come and take that for free. So you're taking what would have been waste, replenishing it, and then redistributing it into the community. There's also volunteer run community gardens where if someone doesn't have the space in their backyard, they can go and volunteer at these places. Usually there's someone that guides them and teaches them how to grow food. And in return, they get to take food home to their family. This has become a pretty popular option in areas, especially in low income areas, where a lot of times the housing doesn't allow an opportunity for that space for a garden. A couple years ago, there was a 17-year-old man that was going to the Hillsborough County public meetings and trying to advocate for one of these community gardens in his area. And he was very much into gardening. So sometimes that's how those initiatives get started. One very successful operation is the St. Pete Eco Village. They have a very well thriving garden, some of the largest romaine lettuce I have seen in my life. They use seaweed as fertilizer, but they also keep rabbits on site and they'll use the rabbit pellets as fertilizer as well. They also have an on site apiary where they keep bees and the bees produce honey. People can live there on site. I know there was a musician that was from Peru that was staying there when I visited. He would go to the cafe, use the computers across the street, work from that location. He would go and work in the gardens for a couple of hours a day, and he lived there for 6 months. So these are just some examples of how those aspects of sustainability can be incorporated into the community. At the same time, a growing shift towards biodegradable materials can also help reduce plastic pollution and encourage product designs that break down more naturally in the environment. These often still take a long time without commercial composters, but they're much safer than materials that are not biodegradable. Looking ahead, waste management is moving away from the traditional take, make, waste model towards a circular approach. In the traditional systems, materials are used once and discarded. In a circular model, products are designed to last longer and be reused, recycled, or composted at the end of their life. This approach reduces waste, conserves resources, and supports a more sustainable economy.